Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah, Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to Nomiki Show. It is Thursday, May 27th, and Joe Biden has suddenly decided to shed his bipartisanism that's entrenched in his bones and his veins because, God forbid, Republicans don't walk the walk when they're talking the talk back at home. Let's show this clip of Joe Biden sort of kind of maybe calling out his Republican friends.
Even my Republican friends in Congress, not a single one of them voted for the rescue plan. I'm not going to embarrass any one of them, but I have here a list of how back in their districts they're bragging about the rescue plan. They touted the restaurant revitalization fund. They touted the fact that we're in a situation where the dealing with touted grants to community health care centers. Touted, I mean, some people have no shame. Even my Republican.
Is this like the new neoliberal way of doing things to appear to be more progressive, but then like not really do anything? It's not like he's the president. It's not like he could actually, instead of pulling a McCarthy, this is what he used to do, is he'd have a file full of names. Why doesn't he actually name the names? Why doesn't he name his Republican friends that are at home touting the plan that they did not vote for? It reminds me a lot of what happened with Obamacare. But you know what happened with Obamacare? President Obama toured the country getting people on board with Obamacare, and they still, they should have changed the name back from Obamacare, frankly. But that's, great branding on the Republican side. I mean, this is ultimately the same issue. Obamacare is extraordinarily popular when it's not called Obamacare. It's the idea, the actual program is popular. The person was not, because the Republicans were running against Obamacare, but actually wouldn't cut it because that would make them lose their positions. So, what could possibly solve that is if Joe Biden stopped acting like he needed to be friends with the Republicans all day long. If Joe Biden, I don't know, maybe called out Joe Manchin for doing the same exact thing. I'm going to start calling Joe Manchin Mini Joe, because the two of them actually do have the same tactics, except Joe Biden doesn't want to look like he's holding up the Senate. He wants Joe Manchin to be the one who's holding up the Senate, because Joe Manchin's so concerned with bipartisanship, because somehow that's the solution to everything. It's not the solution to anything right now. I give credit to Joe Biden for the biggest spending package at home, specifically, with the infrastructure plan, with with these PPP, the PPP plan. I give him credit because it is the most we have spent at home since World War II. I give him credit for that. But let's go all the way, Joe. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could have some transformative legislation that was not being held up by Mini Joe? Mini Joe, who's so focused on bipartisanship. We don't need bipartisanship. You need bipartisanship when the Republicans are in control of the Senate, when Republicans are in control of Congress. Republicans are in control of the legislatures. You know what could solve that? If we got rid of the filibuster, if Big Joe, President Joe, called up Mini Joe and said, you know what? The buck stops here. It's time for you and your little friend, Kirsten Sinema, to actually act like Democrats, because we're not going to be able to protect civil rights. We're not going to be able to deal with gerrymandering. We're not going to be able to win back legislatures. We're not going to be able to codify Roe v. Wade in 2021. Why are we even having this conversation? Oh, why? Because Democrats have been obsessed with bipartisanship. Bipartisanship is only needed when you need to get a Republican on your side to win. But we don't. We need the Democrats on our side to win. We need Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema to win. So bipartisan Joe Biden, go all the way. Go all the way. Get your party to realize that we don't need the Republicans federally right now. That we need to get rid of the filibuster so that we can win back state legislatures where we are being crushed, where actually bipartisanship does matter, because sometimes we have to get Republicans on our side to pass legislation in many of these states. So Joe Biden, Big Joe, go call Mini Joe, and Kirsten Sinema, whatever her nickname's going to be, I'll come up with something. I feel very Trumpian right now. Go call them up and get them to act like Democrats, because there's no need for bipartisanship when you win the Senate and the House and you have a Democratic president. There is no need for bipartisanship when you can get rid of the filibuster. There is no need for it anymore. It's a bluff. It's a bluff, excuse me. It is a bluff. So if we want this transformative change that gets our country out of the sinking hole of despair that we are in right now, and we're not even aware of it fully yet, if we want to hold Republicans' feet to the fire, who are running around their districts claiming, isn't it great that we brought you the pork home, when actually they didn't vote for it, then we have to actually start stepping up and doing this transformative work. And there are only a couple people in the way of that, but you know who could actually stop it? President Joe Biden, master of the Senate. All right, we have a wonderful show today. We have Dr. Jim Zogby, who is on to talk about what is happening, what is the latest, where are we with the ceasefire, where are we in the development of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Israeli bombardment of Palestine, of Gaza. We are going to talk about that with Dr. Jim Zogby. And later we have Arun Chaudhary and the one and only Rab, straight out of Philadelphia. We need a song for that segment. I feel like it's time. Yeah, we should outsource that. All right, we'll be right back with Dr. Zogby. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I am so excited about our first guest, Dr. James Zogby. Dr. Zogby, Dr. Z, is the founder of the Arab American Institute. He is the managing director of Zogby Research Services. Also, so many other things. A fellow of the Sanders Institute, member of the DNC, former member of the executive committee of the DNC. I'm not even looking at the script now. I'm just going to start rolling off. So many, a deputy campaign manager for Jesse Jackson. What else am I missing here? There's a lot here.
Father of 5, grandfather of 13.
13. Oh my goodness. You've got your hands full. Dr. Z, I miss you.
Thank you, Nomiki. I miss you too.
Now that this pandemic's over, we're going to have to catch up in real life in person.
Well,
hopefully.
Yes, but let's not say it's over.
You're correct. You're right. I shouldn't say that. I'm vaccinated. So for me,
more under control.
Yes. So I would love to.
I still have concerns because I have a granddaughter who is immune compromised, and therefore what we don't know is if you're vaccinated, can you convey?
Right.
Can you transmit? And so we're still being cautious around here.
Smart. Is your granddaughter vaccinated?
She can't be.
She's too young.
She's 10, and she had leukemia, and she still takes a kind of a low dose of chemo, and she's doing fine, but we don't do anything to put her at risk, right? So her brother and sister just got vaccinated, which is great, 15 and 18. So we're getting better, but I do think that I didn't think we'd rush back this fast, and I still think caution's a little bit in order. So yeah, I'm not. I guess I got a little agoraphobic in the whole process of being a year inside, and I'm not ready to mingle quite so much. But
are you still smoking cigars? More importantly, okay.
Yes.
All right, I'm in San Juan, Puerto Rico, so I'm gonna have to bring you back a cigar.
Okay.
You just have to tell me what kind you like. Last time I did that, I didn't know anything about cigars. It was probably a horrible cigar. Okay, anyways, now that we've gotten the chit chat out of the way, there is a very serious situation happening in the Mideast right now, and you were the first person I thought of to have on. We've done several panels now and conversations about the state of affairs, but you have been, I guess I want to break this into two parts. The first part is just the sea change in how the public, how Democrats have shifted in discussing Palestine in particular in the last couple of years. Compared with, you were the first person to advocate in the DNC and the hostility that you faced even like 2 years ago around this issue. And then the second part, just, I would love to understand what's really happening. Like, is the Biden administration going to do anything? So let's just start with the politics. Has it transformed enough to make a difference? Where were we 2 years ago?
Huge. Look, let's go back. When I first came to Washington in 1978, there was a coalition called Coalition for New Foreign and Military Policy. Had all of the groups, SANE and all the anti-Vietnam and the various human rights groups around Central America and the Philippines and South Africa, solidarity groups, etc. And we applied to join with the Palestinian Human Rights Campaign. It was a logical home for us. We won the vote for admission. It was like 58-3. But the three groups who said no said that they would withdraw if we were let in, because it would affect them. They were Jewish groups, and they said we don't want them in. So I actually cried about it a bit because they asked me to withdraw the application, and I did. We tried again 3 years later, and the same thing happened again. This time we brought it to a public meeting, and they made their case. And then in 1983, Jackson asked me to be deputy campaign manager, and I did. And even then, Jewish groups came to him and said, if you have Zogby, blah, blah, blah. And I remember I said to him, I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to quit. And he sternly said to me, he said, if you quit, you give them what they want. What they fear most is that you'll stay and fight. And so I stayed, and he fought for me and with me. And in 1988, I won a seat on the DNC. And it was the year I raised the issue of mutual recognition, territorial compromise, and self-determination, not really radical. At the convention, we had a minority plank. And Ron Brown came to me and he said—
Who was Ron Brown for folks?
He was chair of the party at the time, and he'd been chair of the Jackson campaign. He came to me and he said, I think you want to step down from the DNC, because he said, we're getting intelligence that Republicans and Jewish groups are going to come after Dukakis if you're on the DNC. And so I was upset. It hurt. But I agreed to withdraw. He said, I'll make it up to you. And he did. He reappointed me to the DNC in 1993, right before he was leaving to become Commerce Secretary. There was a vacancy. And I've been on the DNC ever since, as you know. Now, as late as 2016, we were having the platform fight. I was negotiating with the very same person that I was negotiating with in '88 who told me back then, if the P word's even in the platform, all hell's going to break loose.
Who was that? Who was that?
Just in
It's public.
in 2016, we're having the debate. It was a little more respectful, right? I mean, it was not as hostile and whatever, and we lost. But think of where we are today, where you have a colloquy organized by Mark Pocan, and you have a dozen members of Congress saying incredibly smart things, and many others who couldn't be there sending letters. And what struck me was not just the power of their statements, but it was Menendez and Schumer, who in their lives had never said a positive thing, finding it necessary to temper their views and sort of do a both sides thing, because they also feel the drift. I mean, they can feel the wind blowing in a different direction. Schumer doesn't want to get primaried, right? Schumer was the guy actually who argued against me from the podium in 1988, when I did the platform plank. He said, the last speaker was the most dishonest, disingenuous, disgraceful. He went on with all the D words, and the boos were so loud from the floor because Jackson had about 1,200 delegates. The chairman had to come out and pound the gavel, pound it in order. But Schumer's singing a different tune, and not because he ever believed what he said before, or even what he believes what he says now, but he's got his finger in the air and he knows which way the wind is blowing. And that, I think, is what we found in the poll that we released today, was that there clearly is a significant shift in public opinion, especially among Democrats. Democratic opinion for the first time is more favorable, has Palestinian favorable numbers. When you say how favorable, unfavorable are attitudes toward Palestinians, Israelis, the Palestinian numbers among Democrats are higher than Israelis. That's never happened before. And it's not just that there's anger at what Israel does in some way, but there's also an awareness of what Palestinians have been enduring. And that is the result of demographic shifts and the way people get information, young people, quote unquote minorities, they have a different sense of the world.
I have a theory about this because I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it's because of this, it's because of that, it's because of this. Okay, I'm going to throw a bunch of things out there because I feel like it's all of these things together. So first off, the Black Lives, the movement for Black Lives, which is undeniably connected in many ways to the fight for Palestine, at least in the organizational sense, and the organizing that happened and the uprising of the last year. Simultaneously, Trump being so aggressive and so aligned with Netanyahu in a way where normie Democrats are like, ooh, no, we can't associate with the Trump monster. Social media and just a deep and frankly Bernie Sanders, really tapping in and elevating this conversation through you, and I think you deserve a tremendous amount of credit, pushing this over the last 4 decades in institutions, pushing it forward with Bernie Sanders, and simultaneously supporting candidates. This is the fifth part, supporting candidates across the country who are running, who Rashida Tlaib. I mean, you were one of her early backers, very close to her, and look at what it means to have her voice in Congress right now. So all of these things, it just seems like, I hate to say a perfect storm because it's not a perfect storm, but I feel like that's kind of part of it. Am I right? Am I missing something? Am I overestimating some things?
It is all of them, as you note. I would just sort of add a little. It wasn't just the Trump Netanyahu marriage. It was also the Netanyahu-Obama hostility. I mean, here was a guy who, from the 90s, I mean, after Oslo was signed, Netanyahu opened a lobby office in Washington to lobby against the Rabin government. they used to issue a.
What was Netanyahu at the time? Just for
He
context.
was, at the time, he didn't have a post. He had been the spokesperson for the foreign ministry, and he'd been in the UN mission for. I mean, he'd had a number of minor posts, but he was a Likud operative, and he and Yigal Karman and another guy started something called the Cloakroom. Something they used to issue these. It was back in the fax days, right? They would do these fax things that would go to members of Congress, and it was the first time. Rabin got pissed. He said it was the first time that the opposition in Israel lobbied against the government in Washington. And when Gingrich was elected to the leadership, the Netanyahu-Gingrich marriage was absolutely solidified, because Netanyahu had actually been a buddy of the neocons going back to the 70s. I mean, he'd been an American, and he developed relationships with the George Wills and the Richard Pearls and the, that whole Doug Feith and all that crowd. And so he has this marriage with Gingrich. So you have Clinton and Rabin against Gingrich and Netanyahu. Netanyahu's first invited speech to the joint session of Congress was Gingrich in 1996, where he came to give a speech called it Making a Clean Break. He wanted to end the Oslo peace process. He did everything he could to do that. So the relationship of him and Republicans goes way back. I think we only, we tried to do our best to publicize it and talk about the relationships. I think it only became very manifest when he became hostile to Obama, and then got invited again to Congress to speak against the Iran deal. And Black members boycotted that, if you recall. It had the same impact as when Andy Young spoke to the PLO in 1979 and got fired from his job as UN ambassador. That had a shock in the Black community. The Obama Netanyahu thing had the same kind of shock and turned people away. So yeah, I mean, there's a long history there that I think is now become solidified in people's consciousness. At the same time, what you say about about Black lives is, yes, organizational. It's also partly generational and partly racial. My brother wrote a book back in 2008, which he defined that generation as white, Black, whatever color, as the first globals. It's the first generation who have a global consciousness. They don't see the world in the way that, it's not like my town, my village, my soccer team, whatever. They think of the environment. They think of, all of the things that are affecting the world. It's the first generation that cared about Darfur or Myanmar or the Rohingya, who even knew where that is in the Uyghurs. I mean, my generation didn't even know what Uyghurs were. Thought it was a kind of a hot dog or something, and the Rohingya, I had no idea what, but now you have a generation that knows that stuff and cares about that. And so Palestinians fit into that, that framework. And
simultaneously, there's a huge, I was talking with this offline with somebody about this in New York, just how there's so many, especially since 9/11, refugees that have come from different parts of the world. It's not mainly European refugees, whether it's Sudan, whether it's the Mideast, whether it's Syria, whether it's Iraq. Last night I had a happy hour with an Iraqi refugee. Literally, it's so much more entrenched in our generation in a different way than the World War II generation of our grandparents, who obviously also understood global politics in a different sense. But yeah, I it's not as large, but it's transformed demographics in New York City in terms of politics enough to make a difference.
Because the refugees who came in earlier generations, because of the way that immigration system and the quotas worked, were European, right? It was big. When East Europeans first came, it was, we don't want that riffraff. The same stuff that's being said. The shithole countries back then were Hungary and Poland. We don't want them, but that's all been changed, and now the people coming who we say can't be like us and won't ever be like us are from the Americas and are from Africa and are from South Asia. And they have different religions. But they will, look, I happen to be, in one way, an American exceptionalist, right? Which is maybe unusual for being the progressive Democrat, whatever. But I happen to believe that as I look at history, there have been continuing periods and movements that have tried to define America as white and Christian, and not just white, but Northwest European. Old Pat Robertson, back, Donald Trump, etc. They're not like us, but America changes. And what happens is that as these groups become American, America itself changes. Talk about what's American food, what's American music, what's American humor, what's American style or fashion or culture. You can't define it without there being an influence of Black and Italian and Chinese and Jewish and now Arab. The only problem I have with the Arab one is that they don't give us credit for it. They call it Israeli food and Israeli whatever. But, we are all changing what America is. And so I believe this will also happen. And unfortunately, tragically, what's going to happen is that 30 years from now, the descendants of the immigrants and the refugees who are coming now being rejected will most likely want to reject the immigrants and refugees coming back then, coming at that point. But it changed. There's a dialectic here, and it continues to evolve. I think America just gets more diverse and better. When my mother's generation looked at the Eastern Europeans and said, "Oh my God, we can't deal with them. They're like weird and different." But Hazleton, Pennsylvania. Hazleton, Pennsylvania is where Barletta came from. The guy who, as mayor, tried to block. He passed an Arizona law in his city, basically blocking illegal
HB 1070. You mean?
Yeah. Right. He then ran for Congress and won, and was a bigot and a Trump-like bigot. He's probably going to run for Senate this year. He's a horrid person, but he mobilized. Hazleton was coal mining town of 33,000 people. It had dropped to 18,000 people, and then Latinos started to come in. They had never had a Black person or a person of color. It was an all-white city, but it was complex. Hungarian, Slovak, Czech, etc. So many people. Some great researcher did a Hazleton then and now, went back to the 20s and 30s when the Eastern Europeans were coming to work in the mines. And he found the news stories and the city council speeches about the lazy Hungarians or the drunken this or the whatever that, and how dangerous it is. And they fight and they rob and they this. And he compared it with the stuff that the descendants of that generation were saying about Latinos today. What's happened now in Hazleton in the last 10 years is that since Barletta, is that the city went down to 18,000, is now back up into the 20s, mid 20s. The Latino communities brought businesses, they brought jobs, they brought a new young generation of kids, and they're changing the character of the city. And oh, by the way, they're intermarrying.
Oh, God forbid. Yeah. I'll have to ask. We have Rep Rabb on from Pennsylvania on a little bit later. I'll ask him about his experience with
there is this change. There is this change taking place. Anyway, sorry.
So let's no. It's great because I'll ask Rep. You should connect with him too. Rep Rabb is the most progressive representative in Pennsylvania in the 200th district. So he's always telling horror stories about being in the legislature there. But okay, so the current state right now, there's this ceasefire, which for our audience at least is definitely not a solution. A Band-Aid, I guess. Okay, there was a relationship with Obama that was not great, was tense. What is the relationship like with Biden, and what could possibly be done now? So much. Israel has taken over so much land. I mean, we've been seeing these maps over the last few weeks circulate on the internet, and it's jarring and it's horrifying. I mean, where is the solution, and is it possible with Biden, and what's their relationship really like?
Look, I will agree with you. I call it the two-state absolution, not solution, because it's like politicians who at this point don't want to talk about it. When asked, the New York Times did an interview with all the candidates in 2019, and when asked the question was, what would you do if Israel continues to violate the human rights of Palestinians? And they looked like, because they did it video as well as transcript.
Oh yeah.
They looked like, I don't know if you ever read the comic strip Big Nate, when his teacher gives him a pop quiz and his eyes bug out of his head. And it's like the thought cloud is, oh shit, what am I gonna do now? Study. And they all looked like that. They all looked like that, with the exception of Bernie and a couple others.
So funny.
And then like, oh God. Then they said, I support the two-state solution. It was like, okay, am I done now? Can I get out of here? It's like, and so they supported it at the very point in time when you can't have it. When it might have made a difference, they didn't support it. So now here we are. I don't know where you'd create the Palestinian state, because so much land has been taken and it needs to be viable. And you can't include some of these crazy settlers who are really ideologically nuts in the midst of it. So the struggle becomes one for human rights and equality. And that's a long haul. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody, to have to go through another generation of this. But I think if the administration is going to play any meaningful role, they have to rescind their platform commitment not to condition aid to Israel. And that doesn't mean just financial aid in the form of military. I mean, the dumbest thing in the world was agreeing to $735 million in arms to Israel in the midst of this thing. They did it before it, but the optics of it, I said before, I said, we've become the coat holder and the cheerleader for Israel. Now we become the gun reloader. It's like, what a weird, awful thing you would have think somebody at the White House would say, I know we agreed to this, but let's hold off right now, because it
was that Netanyahu's idea, like in terms of the timing of all of it? I know he's got his own political situation, but
Israel gets 3.8 billion, but then they can ask for how to spend that. See, they get the money up front in a check. They don't ever, unlike every other country that gets aid from the US, it gets parsed out through AID and other government contractors. Israel gets it in a lump sum. And then they say, oh, we're going to use it for this, we're going to use it for that, we're going to use it. They're collecting interest on it in American banks, right? Because they get the check in October. Before anybody else gets theirs, they get it in a check, and then they decide how they want to use it. They wanted to use it. Now, did Netanyahu ask for it? Did Biden offer it? I assume the Israelis asked for it, which means that this may have been something that they knew that they would need to get replenished because they were using all their bombs. And so becoming the resupplier makes us complicit in what they just did. It's not just immoral and illegal in terms of our own law about how weapons can be used. It's also politically stupid in terms of the optics of it. And so, I mean, I didn't get it at all. And in the poll, what we found is that absolute overwhelming majority of Democrats were saying, don't do it. Don't give this to them now. It's not a good idea. And Republicans were evenly divided on it, which I thought was also kind of interesting. So where's Biden? I don't think we know. I mean, I think we know where Biden was, but what we saw was that Biden could be moved by progressives on economic front, on several domestic policy issues, and also
his own staff. He had 200 members of his staff sign a letter. 500. Oh, last time I checked. That's 500. Insane.
And I'm so proud because it was organized by somebody who used to work for me for 2 years. And then before she left to go to the campaign. I mean, just a great young woman. And that's where his base is. So will he recognize his base wants him to move? There are some entrenched interests. I mean, he's been around for so long and he's got ingrained attitudes. It'll take some moving, but I do think that the writing on the wall is there. Look, I always say, you don't judge a president by the agenda they set for themselves, but how they respond to the agenda the world sets for them. He was going to focus on everything but the Middle East. Guess what? Middle East doesn't give you a pass. And so he's got to address it now. And what this ceasefire did was basically just stop the bombs for a bit, but nothing got solved in Jerusalem. Nothing got solved in with regard to the Al-Aqsa. And nothing got solved with regard to Gaza. And frankly, I'm not a fan of Hamas at all. I think they hijacked what was happening in Jerusalem because they wanted to be the center of attention, and ended up getting 230 of their people dead and the Gaza Strip destroyed. To go back to right where we were before it all started, no progress at all. Not a smart move on their part. A cruel and just inhuman behavior on the part of the Israelis, stupid, and totally inhuman on the part of Hamas. I mean, these were two bad guys going at each other, and the Palestinian people were the victims of the whole thing. But that said, the administration has to figure it out, and there is no solution with Hamas, but there's no solution without Hamas. And Abu Mazen, the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, he's no prize either. But there needs to be Palestinian unity, and so pressuring the Fatah and Hamas to create a unity within the PLO and have the PLO be the organized force that negotiates this with new leadership has to happen. I frankly had my favorite in the Palestinian election that was about to come up that got canceled. I thought that Nasser al-Qidwa was just a remarkable leader. He and Marwan Barghouti combined would have provided vision and charisma that was needed, and a new strategy. But they're not going to be able to negotiate two states, but what they can negotiate is a controlling of how Israel behaves, with checkpoints, with denying Palestinians the freedom to import and export to grow their economy, with denying them freedom of movement within the territories, with denying them the freedom to build homes without fear of being demolished, to have access to Jerusalem. I mean, in Jerusalem, Israel calls it East Jerusalem. It's not. In 1968-9, when they started this, what they annexed were actually 28 Palestinian villages around Jerusalem. It'd be the same as taking Nassau County and saying it's all New York, right? Yeah, people, whatever. But the problem is that what happens then if you add, I do use the Beltway example here. If you take the Beltway and say this is all Washington now, right? What happens to all the people outside of the Beltway who work in Washington every day and can't get in because it's closed? What happens to the businesses that depend upon them? So when I was going back and forth to Jerusalem, the hotel clerk had a PhD in clinical psychology, and his clients all came from the West Bank, and he was now working as the night clerk at a hotel. And you have that, the frustration in Jerusalem is that it was the hub of the West Bank, and now it's severed. Israelis don't shop in East Jerusalem. Palestinians can't shop. The businesses dried up. The hospitals, the social service entities, the schools are all severed from the rest of the body. Biden can do something about that. He can tell the Israelis, cut that shit out, connect these people with each other, and stop seizing their homes to Judaize East Jerusalem, to get the Arabs' numbers down and the Jewish numbers up. There's a lot we can do. But we have to be willing to tell Israel to change its behavior and condition US support on that, not just the military aid, but why when the Palestinians said they're going to the International Criminal Court with charges, why did we say our response was to sanction the International Criminal Court, right? I mean, yeah.
Okay, we have a couple minutes, only 2 minutes left.
I'm sorry, I've gone on.
No. This is, oh my God, no. This is. You've touched on everything. There's nothing to be sorry about. This is why we're having you on, Dr. Z. But I have one more question. Netanyahu's political situation. this was his strategy to stay in office under investigation, et cetera. Did it work? Do you think it worked?
Well, I don't know. The opposition is like a Rubik's Cube, except Rubik's Cubes can be solved. I mean, if this group says, well, we want to get out, the only thing they agree on is getting Netanyahu out, but they hate each other and they have wildly different views of each other. And he's played them quite well. So I think, yeah, he gave himself a breath of a reprieve right now. I don't know if they have another election, if it comes out any differently. I mean, what I've seen from the polls is that some parties go up and some parties come down, but the overall balance is no different. The internal divisions on the Jewish side are huge. One of the things that was interesting in this conflict, if I could use interesting, was that for the Israelis who said two things. One was, well, we have peace with all the Arab countries now. They're making peace with us. The conflict's over. Well, they learned that that wasn't the case. And for those who said, look, one of the Arab parties wants to be a part of our government now, so we've solved the Palestinian problem too inside. Well, that didn't work out either, because what happened in the unrest in the urban centers was not, as the New York Times describes, angry mobs, violent Arabs, whatever. And the words that Isabel Kirshner used were just grating. I mean, if it had been written about Black people, we would say racist. The group that actually fomented this was a group, the focus of which is to move people into these cities to make them more Jewish. And so they were bringing settlers from the West Bank back into Israel to live in these cities that had too many Arab people living in them. And they were creating internal tension in the cities. And it finally erupted because Arabs are second. There was an interesting interview I saw with somebody recently, an Israeli, saying, the guy said to him, is it fair when people call Israel an apartheid state? He said, no. We're not an apartheid state. That's anti-Semitic to say that. We're a state that has first, second, and third class citizens.
Oh my God. He said the quiet part out loud.
with no sense that didn't compute. There's a problem. But what happened when they erupted was that the Israelis had to say to themselves, wait a minute, it's not working here, it's not working there, it's not working anywhere. And I don't think it's dawned on a lot of people yet, but I think a change in Biden policy, if we were to get tough with Israel, the debate in Israel over their future would change. Yeah. Right now, there's no price to pay for bad behavior.
We're their paternal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially it, right?
Yeah, it's like a spoiled child. You keep saying to them, we don't want you to build settlements. They do. Don't build settlements. They do. Don't build settlements. They do. They're going to get the message. Guess what? I don't give a shit what they say. I can do it. So impunity is what runs the day. And what we have to be able to do is say, you cannot continue to operate this way.
Yep. Dr. Zogby, much love. Be well. Stay well. Thank you for joining us.
Follow me on Twitter if you want to get more on the poll.
Yes.
It comes out all and we're going to bring it out in dribs and drabs. We'd be happy to share views.
Put your Twitter in the bio section so everybody sees it on Twitch and YouTube. Thank you, Dr. Z. Take care. We'll be right back with our amazing panel. Dr. Z Dr. Z's on right now. What am I talking about? Representative Rabb and Arun Chaudhary will be on in just a second. All right. So y'all know I love Sunset Lake CBD. They're the best. I used to be skeptical of CBD because I bought some from a bodega for like $100 and it tasted really disgusting and didn't do anything. And I didn't understand. I thought it was a gimmick. But I learned about Sunset Lake CBD from our good friend Sam Cedar, who swore by it for sleeping and other things. And guess what? He was right. Joke's on me. Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm in Vermont to your door. They have all types of products, salves, coffee, gummies, tinctures, everything to help with stress, aches, and pains. Their farm was a Ben & Jerry's farm that they decided to diversify and grow premium hemp. They enhance, when you support them, you're enhancing rural economies. This is a great company that treats their employees well. Their minimum wage is $15 an hour, and the employees own the majority of the company. And on top of it, they support independent media like our show, and of course, the Majority Report and the David Pakman Show as well. They have a new product out, the CBD dog biscuits. You got to check that out. And the CBD lotion. The dog biscuits are edible by all beings. If the beings can eat pumpkin, peanut butter, and oat flour. I think that's gluten-free, if I'm correct. You got to go check that one out. But I love it. I use a tincture every night to go to sleep. It gives me a deeper sleep. I wake up earlier in the morning. I've noticed that my sleep cycles have changed drastically. Real quick, Dorsey, tell me, what are you using right now? Real quick.
I'm always a big fan of the gummies. Those are my favorites. I have them here on my
Pop a gummy right now. I want to see you do it in.
Okay.
They're so delicious. The problem is I eat like 6 at a time.
That's the problem. They are delicious, and I would want to have the whole bottle, but one's enough. And I'll have my headache will slowly clear out. I have a headache from last night from going to the garden and cheering on the Knicks.
From the Knicks game?
Yelling my head off. You could probably hear it. The Knicks won. Yes, it was great. A lot of fun. And I was screaming the whole time. And now I have a huge headache. Even when
Take that CBD.
Yeah. But yeah, I also like the tincture before bed for a good night's sleep. It's the best. And
it's fabulous.
Yeah. Can't really do without it these days.
All right, guys, if you would like to purchase some Sunset Lake CBD products, go to sunsetlakecbd.com, sunsetlakecbd.com. You will get 20% off of your purchase if you type in NOMI, N-O-M-I, at sunsetlakecbd.com. Type in NOMI. It's worth it. They're amazing. All right, we got some Arun Chaudhary action here and Rep Rabb action here. Thank you for your patience. We had a very a good conversation with Dr. Zogby earlier, who Hazleton, Pennsylvania, he mentioned that there's a crazy representative there in Pennsylvania. Your colleague? No.
Which one? What?
No, the one that represents, who did like the SB 1070 law, but in Pennsylvania. That's not the topic. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, see, now I gotta be reminded who it is, because you
got so many. You got a big legislature.
Be a close personal friend of mine.
It's his schoolyard now.
The Republican. Yeah. I'm gonna guess it's not your friend. He's not your friend. Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for your patience. Let's talk some politics. We got some politics. Obama talks about what he could have done better in his presidency. I feel like this is a very good panel to have this conversation. So let's roll that and get former Obama staffer and Obama supporter the responses.
Yep, I'm ready. Here we go.
Ready. Oh, wait, 1 second. Got to get the clip ready. Meanwhile, Run, where are you? You're not in Berlin.
In Kosovo, and I just finished recording our late night reading for the committee program on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to hear a little Tiberius ruckus.
You caught me. I did not introduce you. So while Dorsey's rolling this out, Representative Rabb is, if you've never watched our show before, he represents the 200th district of Pennsylvania, Northwest Philly, the most progressive member. And Arun Chaudhary is, I believe it. Oh, it's my opinion. I'm not asking you. Arun Chaudhary is the host of the committee program, which airs here Mondays at 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. He is, of course, a political filmmaker, formerly the first White House videographer and creative director for Bernie Sanders 2016. How are we with that clip? Is Obama interfering with the show? Ready? Here we go. Oh, he looks so old.
If you ask me, what are the things I wish I might have done better or more effectively, the thing that I constantly struggled with was how could I get the passion and concern that had been focused with Trayvon and Ferguson and the subsequent events. How could I help people make the link between those events and political power and action, not just at the federal level, but even more importantly at the state and local levels, where the vast majority of criminal law and policing decisions are made?
Okay, I'm just going to start with a little bit of my take. I know that you guys have much bigger takes. I'm just going to start with the thing that I know, which is if you cared about state and local power, maybe you should have not funneled all the money into your consultants' pockets, because all those Democrats who put all that beautiful money into winning elections, after your first shellacking, if you recall that, maybe you should have like taken those resources and put them into state and local governments so that these criminal justice laws would not be non-existent and slashed in many of these states, as Rep. Rabb knows too well, because Republicans took them over and then gerrymandered, and then you just like caused 20 years of problems. Just going to start with that one. There's a lot more to unpack there, but let's go to Rep. Rabb first and then seal the deal with former Obama staffer, Arun Chaudhary.
You just love saying that, don't you? Poor Arun. No, ditto. That's it.
No, I feel that. And I will say, I think Obama's not the qualified person to sort of talk about this. You know what I mean? Like, the presidency is a bubble. You know, the president is in many ways a hostage to many things, their own belief systems, the people around them. And, you know, anyone who's heard me talk about it on your radio show, especially, Nomi, you know, about my time with Obama.
When he says my radio show, he means my old radio show on Sirius XM.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry to be
For
confusing.
folks who didn't know I had a radio show. We go back.
Yeah, it was good. And look, he believes in the meritocracy. He's a product of the meritocracy. He's maybe one of the last products of the meritocracy. And that way that no one under a certain age believes that there is such a thing. He believes it all the way down to his toes because he feels like that's the only way he is in any way that he is. And because of that implicit trust of those kinds of institutions, the people around you just are the ones, they are the gatekeepers of ideology. You get a range of choices as the president. Here's 7 things you can do, you know, and if the range of them are 7 pretty crappy things, I would say more often than not, Barack Obama would pick the best of the 7 crappy things. But his failure was to ask beyond that, you know, to be like, you know what, these aren't good enough. I said I wanted to end the war in Iraq for real, not pretend. And like the options just didn't come in. And I don't think he questioned that. So I think where it comes to questioning things, he doesn't question those things. Like, you know, in his book, he didn't question Rahm Emanuel. To my, you know, thinking even then on staff, you're like, why is this guy here? We don't like this guy. You know, it wasn't like he was popular with the staff. You know, it was like, what the hell? Why is this guy here? And so I feel like it's too bad that he didn't spend those years writing the book, sort of doing more of this interesting reflecting, and that the book was so sort of ordinary. And this comment seems like something he's thinking of, and I know him. This is something he's thinking of as he's going. He didn't like premeditate this that much. He's actually answering the question, which seems like a dumb thing to do to me. You know, he really should have thought, like, presidents are obsessed with their legacy, and he really doesn't seem to see that where he wants to take his legacy in the normal president, you know, normal president to do normal president things direction is just not where the country is going.
See, I have a theory that I don't think he's of meritocracy. I think people who are of meritocracy, you know, really like, I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't hustle. He absolutely, you know, lost an election, ran again, but there is this like, it's almost like he has, it's like a de Blasio thing, right? Creatures of politics and the political environment, but lack like the actual political skills that, and I think Kamala Harris has the same issue. There's this rawness. There's this fighter. I mean, you know Arun very well. It's like the Tammany Hall instincts. It's what Chuck Schumer has.
His answer is sort of organizing doublespeak. It's not politics.
Like,
it's not how politics work.
It's
that's
not how
right.
organizing works either. He's not, I mean, that's the thing. I was listening to him. I was like, that's not an organizer speaking, former community organizer. And that's not how somebody who ascended to the presidency speaks post-presidency, post-Trump. It just felt like it was disconnected from what I think he's the emblem of, disconnected from the ground, which is the neoliberal class of that generation of politicians that were groomed and, supported from Harvard. They're, and when I say groomed, I mean, like, they provide funders, around them. And they don't have to do the work that Rep. Rabb does, where he has to, it's just different work. It's different work. And so what happens is they have a technocratic universe around them of all of his 7 people delivering things. Whereas if you're, I don't know, I'm not defending Chuck Schumer's politics, but I don't feel like Chuck Schumer is waiting for someone to give him an idea. He's like, bath salts. I'm doing a press conference on that right now because I know that people are angry about bath salts and it works. And he sings, New York State of Mind or whatever his song was. I love New York on the subway the other day because he's just like, he sees a thing and he's like, I've got to respond to it because I'm a politician who's on the streets. Rep. Rabb. Technocrats. That was basically my rant, was just basically he's a technocrat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having a hard time processing the meritocracy framing, and it reminds me of something he said.
I don't understand
why we're having
a problem with that.
Fight it out.
No, but Barack Obama, no one wanted, like you're talking about, like, oh, this guy from Harvard got to be president. Yeah, how did this half black guy get to go to Harvard? Like nobody wanted him there. His parents didn't have a lot of money. Like, these things, like, to actually see your life sort of go step by step. And I say this because, like, this is a fight I get in with people because, like, my parents were born lower middle class and are now upper middle class. They did the thing, like, came from India, hustled, was born in the Bronx, hustled. And, like, I, with my eyes open, see that there is no meritocracy and see that there is no way forward and see none of this stuff works. But this stuff does get ingrained with you, and it's not bullcrap because it's basically, it becomes a weapon, especially to use against immigrant communities where, like, you can't afford not to have that energy and not to have that push.
Well, I mean, in many respects, Arun, like, I think he borrows from some of that perspective, not being African-American, right? I mean, he's African-American, but he's not African-American. Like he did not have the typical Black experience. Exactly. And so I think in many ways he was learning on the job as an elected official, representing a whole bunch of folks. And sometimes, the whole kind of post-racial meme that is attributed to him. Like, I've never met a Black person who said that. I mean, who wasn't a conservative. Like, or saying that, it's not racism anymore, it's more classism. I don't hear even super privileged Black folks say stuff like that. And it's a tension point in the Black community because we don't want to play the, well, he's not really Black, because he is. But when we're talking about the lived experiences of a Barack Obama, they are anomalous in many respects. It's not anomalous that he went to elite schools. Black folk have been going to elite schools, for like 3 generations now. That's not anomalous. But how he processes it, given his own lived experiences, that's very different. And that's a conversation a lot of us don't want to have in public, because then white folk who are not operating in good faith use that to divide us. Mm-hmm. And that's, we already have enough divisions as is. And so now that he's out of office, I think there's a more vocal subset of Black folk, myself included, who don't feel as concerned about dissenting opinions about his leadership in office or lack thereof in certain ways. I found him, particularly as it related to issues around racial justice, particularly lacking. And I understand that, there's a great double standard when a Black person in a position of power says things. He's punished for it in ways that Bill Clinton wasn't. Bill Clinton, I think they did a study of how much he talked about race compared to Barack Obama, and it was a lot more, but he was a white Southerner.
But he
could say that. It's not a level playing field, right?
You know what would have helped though? If he actually put money into state parties so he could have a bunch of local people supporting him, rather than, I don't know, like, it'd be great to have like an army of Democrats being like, no, crazy ass Republican racist. Don't forget the Tea Party rose, and we just were just like, oh, please take the tea, just take it. Sorry, this is like, it's so. One more thing I want to add to this, because of the conversation we had prior with Dr. Zogby about the situation in the Mideast. It's not just that he was raised in an atypical American situation, Black American situation in Hawaii, but also abroad in Asia. And so he was able to be very, strangely courageous when it came to some foreign policy issues. Some, it did not permeate through the Democratic Party, did not permeate through Congress, it definitely didn't go into Senate, but he had a very toxic relationship with Netanyahu and was able to just see things like almost from an intuitive lens because he was raised in a place he was in Indonesia.
He knows that guy. We all know that guy. Yeah,
we know that guy, and it's so interesting, the dichotomy between how he did fluently speak, not my words, speak from a typical Black American perspective, from an intuitive perspective, the way that he did when it came to foreign issues. It's just so interesting to see this person who is now.
I think some of the foreign policy is also from hippie mom food, and I think it's from that.
Well, that was why she was in Indonesia. Yeah. She was doing.
Yeah, and so it even has, I think, some of that sort of 60s dynamic in it. But actually, I have like such an interesting thing, like when you're president. So when he met Bibi, I have a great picture of the two of them meeting each other for the first time in 2008 during the election. Like we went, we were in Jerusalem, and I was taking pictures that day.
This is the general election or the primary?
Before the general election, Obama did a foreign trip because he didn't have enough foreign experience. And so it was actually a very smart move. Mitt Romney did the same thing, and it was a disaster in 2012, which I love every second of. It's a visceral thing. It's like, I felt like me. It's like, being when you're middle class around rich people, you're like, oh, okay, I know how you operate, and you just sort of like learn how it all works. But something he didn't get to see is such an interesting moment that speaks to the complexity of all of this was our first trip to Africa. He spoke in Ghana. It was like so many people went and saw him, the continent like shifted, like whatever, it was this insane. Obviously people made dresses, that it was, people were pretty happy about it, except on the beach right outside the hotel we were at, which is like not like a fancy beach. It's like the hotels are walled off from the beach, which is like where actually regular people are playing soccer, doing their thing. And it was just regular Ghanaian people. And they hated Barack Obama and like wanted to talk about it. And it was,
what?
It was
Why?
A lot of, because he was a Black American, they didn't consider him to be a proper African. And they, I think, were sort of reflecting the kind of conflict that can come between those two communities. And we're like, we're the tough ones. We're from the continent, like we'll go to America, we'll mess all you up. It was just like sort of very, Obama was in town and they didn't like it. And they were expressing it as close as they could get to his security fence. And it's something that he would never get to see, but it was just such an, rich moment in just all of these things coming together. Class and race and colonialism and history and modern geopolitics. What a mess.
So that really is. I think there's this, I guess, unspoken rule. Maybe it's an official rule with historians, where presidential historians are not allowed, not to do official biographies of presidents until 20 years later. Supposedly, I was told by an historian, and until after their presidency. So the reason is that the policies start. From what I was told, the policies, the legacies of the policies, the legacies of legislation, there's been enough of a tide that's shifted for there to be a real understanding of what the presidency represented. And I think we're just starting to kind of get this holistic perspective of what the presidency of Barack Obama could have been, just as if, just like we now understand who Bill Clinton was in a deeper way in the general public. Okay, I want to switch gears just real quick. This is such a big conversation. I would love to continue this for like an hour, but I wanted to talk about this yesterday. We're going to talk about it today. Congressman Richie Torres is a congressman from New York, from the Bronx. He was a city council member in New York City, and he was just elected in the Bronx. He replaced Jose Serrano, who was there for a long time and was arguably more progressive. I would not go as far to say he's like a progressive hero. The people who say that, I'm just like, okay, but definitely more progressive than Richie Torres, who is a millennial, who's talked about his mental health issues publicly, who is a housing advocate because he grew up in public housing. So in New York City, when it comes to some issues, he does stand more progressive. But then there's some other issues, not so much, and we'll get to that. But let's play this clip of Karl Rove talking about what he knows so well, the split in the progressive democratic socialist movement.
However, Democratic Congressman from Minnesota, Dean Phillips, he says, I'll say the quiet part out loud. It's time for progressives to start condemning anti-Semitism and violent attacks on Jewish people with the same intention and vigor demonstrated in other areas of activism. The silence has been deafening. End quote on the tweet, Karl. How does this play out then?
Well, Dean Phillips is a more traditional Democrat. I look to Richie Torres, who is a Democratic socialist and a strong supporter of Israel. So there's a divide even within the hard left of the Democratic Party. But I don't think either the White House nor the Democratic leadership wants to show the divide inside the Democratic Party. And frankly, the Democratic Socialist left is making a mistake by trying to have a debate over this. Bernie Sanders, if he tried to block the sale of arms to Israel, would end up on the losing side in a big positive vote for such aid and a very small vote against such aid. I frankly think that might be healthy because it would certainly show the current state of affairs inside the Democratic Party. There is a growing sentiment against Israel, but I think it's still a minority sentiment inside the Democratic Party. So virtually every Republican and most Democrats together stand in support of a democratic Israel and its right to exist.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know DSA endorsed Richie Torres.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that either.
Such a brilliant. This is so Karl. This is so Rovian. It's brilliant.
I mean, he's better than like he had that meltdown, and so we all sort of forget that he's actually super clever, right? Like politically. Yeah, and like his thing about finding new voters and wedge lines in the old things and busting it up. I mean, like he sees, he sees the black light. The black light on the Democratic Party. He's like, whoa, yuck. Like he sees every little nook and cranny. And he knows how to get in there.
It's so, listen, it's categorically false. For those of you who may be too young to remember who Karl Rove was. But Karl Rove is also an effing genius. We got to think like that. We got to do that stuff. I don't know. Chris, what do you think?
Well, one of the things one is we can't be saying anti-Semitism, we mean anti-Jewish, number one, because Arabs are Semites too. I think that's important to make. It is factually accurate. So I don't ever use that term unless you're talking about both Arabs and Jews. And 99% of people who use that term are not talking about Arabs. And there's always been anti-Arab hate and violence. Been stereotyped in Hollywood, et cetera, et cetera. There's been in state law, in local ordinances, anti-Jewish policies. This is the norm. The thing that and certainly anti-Black, anti-immigrant. If you're from the wrong places in the world, the swarthier your ancestors, the less likely you are well treated in this country. So the thing that we have in common is fighting white supremacy. And if we don't say that, then we are complicit. And also, like, some of the biggest hate that I've gotten from me posting my solidarity with Palestinian civilians has been white supremacists who I know are anti-Semitic. They hate Jews and Arabs. They just love Israel for themselves, after the rapture. And
yeah, exactly.
And so we're talking about,
So let's play a little Rovian politics here. I'm going to start calling Richie Torres a rapture dino. And I say that because not only is Richie Torres a partner with AIPAC, who the majority of the people that AIPAC support are Republicans. There are absolutely Democrats that they support. But let's just be real clear. This is a right-wing organization, Zionist organization that is infecting, they've gone into the religious right and also like the sellout left. I'm saying left because there are people who are like Richie Torres who were 80% progressive at one point and now are moving more. But Richie Torres is also a big fan of the statehood party in Puerto Rico. The statehood party being the Trump party, the party of the right wing. Richie Torres literally got elected because he was able to raise a ton of money. He's openly gay. He raised a ton of money from the LGBTQ community who supported him because they believed in him as they should, as an ally, right? Well, guess what? The statehood party in Puerto Rico has literally just gotten a bill passed or they blocked a bill banning conversion therapy. So what kind of lawmaker are you if you are aligning with the anti-gay, anti-black, I mean, like literally it's like the white supremacy party in the resident commissioner of Puerto Rico was the co-chair of Latinos for Trump. And she's the statehooder who co-signed this bill. And Richie Torres, half Puerto Rican, literally is now, I mean, like the centrist Democrats aren't even for the statehood party. Literally, like it's insane. Like how far, this is insane, but it's similar. It is similar because it's these weird wedge issues that most mainstream people don't really understand the nuance of. And it's like a pathway now. It's like the new neoliberal is this, because you can't get away with the old neoliberal. And so you see a lot of young lawmakers in Congress, Ruben Gallego, who I've known since I was like in college, in Arizona. Ruben Gallego, a young Democratic lawmaker, same thing, pro-statehood, pro-Israel. It's this flavor of, I'm progressive on like 80% of the issues, but the 20% that I'm not are really, really, really bad.
Well, and this also reminds me of this phenomenon of representational politics, where if you have someone from the right demographic, then okay, check that box. And we can see that that's never worked out. That's never worked out. Ultimately, there's no proxy for integrity, for values, for competency, for ethics. That stuff matters. The first person who I endorsed after I won was Larry Krasner, who was running for district attorney, who has now become like the most progressive district attorney in the country. I've worked very closely with his team on the government side. Very impressive team that he's assembled, great vision. But when he called me first, and I didn't really know him, he was actually a constituent, but I didn't know him. I said, I'm holding out for a progressive of color to run. And he's like, okay, I mean, I can't help being, white, but I hear you. And then when no one else ran, I gave him a second look. I liked what he had to say, and I hoped that he would walk the talk, and I supported him. There are Black folk, there are people of color who are going to say, this is a Black city and this is an important position for us, and not be the right person for the job because their politics are jacked up. And so when we talk about this is the difference between identity politics, right? Because that's really that is a right-wing term like PC is, right? Yeah. But representational means as long as the person looks the right way and it fits the right demographic, that's enough. And that is actually a problem that the liberal establishment has, that we have to be careful of. And the folks who take advantage of that are the ones we have to be careful of too.
Last words, Arun.
It's just heartbreaking, especially when you talk about the Puerto Rican statehood party, because it's almost, when you said that, immediately made me think like, you can get away with supporting weird things in foreign countries, and that's the way we treat Puerto Rico. And it's just sort of, even in New York City, it's sort of like, yeah, you can kind of get a little weirder if you get out there a little farther. You like somebody weird in Ukraine, that's all right. Like, and it just feels like that in a really sad, sick way. And it just sort of, we're all waiting for the documentary so that we can educate ourselves better. But like,
meaning my documentary.
What do we want? You know what I mean? These are our brothers and sisters. These are human beings we care about. And like, I don't know what I'm supposed to want for them, other than self-determination.
Right.
Self-determination is a great path, just like that's essentially it. Yeah. We'll wait for the documentary. Speaking of, I have to go do it.
I'm the perpetual nudge. I'm like, how's the doc?
Speaking of, I have to go do it in like 10 minutes, meaning the documentary. There's lots of documentary work here to do in Puerto Rico. But if you would like to contribute to our Puerto Rico documentary fund, please let me know. You can email me at thenomikishow@gmail.com, because we're constantly looking for funders, because it's a complicated issue, and shocker, the hedge funders don't want to contribute to our documentary. Also become a patron at patreon.com/thenomiki show. Also go to the committee shows, fans.fm/committee program. Committee. Just committee. If you can spell committee, because I still can't.
Double everything, you're good. You're there.
That's it. The doubles. Thank you, Arun Chaudhary. Thank you, Rab. Go check out the committee program Mondays, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. on this channel and on Twitch, and of course over at Fans. And I've got some shout outs to do. All right, we had some comments. We had a comment from Alexandros 2032. The elected progressives I follow on Twitter have already said this, and I still don't know what they're talking about. But at least they call Israel for what it is, an apartheid state. I don't know what this was, but okay. Bob Carmody. Any editors out there? Your assignment is to set Arun's hand movements to a classical piece. Oh, Arun, did you hear that? Arun has a big Hogwarts professor vibe today, Hondo said. Just you have a Hogwarts vibe because you're wearing a robe. You do this.
Yeah, it's from the segment on this anyway. It's the whole thing.
You gotta watch the show.
Program, you'll get it.
You'll get it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ken M send some love. Ian Kinzel also send some love. Says we often talk about Santa, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy as childhood myths. When can we finally add bipartisanship to that list? Agreed. All right, that's it. I think that's a great plan. We're going to talk about how bipartisanship is one of our childhood myths. Much love to everybody. Thanks to Brad. Thanks to, of course, Dorsey, who is manning the fort, manning everything right now. We will see you tomorrow for Fem Friday, right here on Twitch and YouTube. Thank you to all of our moderators for working those algorithms and getting all the trolls out on Twitch and YouTube. Oh, wait, we have one more. I'm missing everything. I missed it. We have more shout outs. Sorry, guys. Quasi Spec says, I remember like two specific times where Obama talked about being Black in America, and both times there was a lot of rasting. I don't know what that means. Prairie Fire Kowalski says, hi. Thanks, Prairie Fire Kowalski. And of course, oh, what? Hi, what? Thank you, Nomiki. I missed. Okay, it was a dramatic thing. Hi, what? Thank you, Nomiki. That's what he said. And then, oh no, that's a different, I'm so confused, guys. All right, thank you, Nomiki is a different person who sent some love, I think. Maybe, or maybe that was Prairie Fire Kowalski. The name is what? What says, thank you, Nomiki. Thank you. What with an exclamation point. Thank you to everybody in the live chats and to Harvey K, Professor Harvey K, and of course, all of our moderators and the folks working the algorithms. We are so grateful to you on Twitch and YouTube. We will see you tomorrow, same time, same place, Twitch and YouTube. And patrons, we are always grateful to you as well. Stay in solidarity.
The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.